Hello everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my BookTube channel. This week's video is going to be my Geekly Wrap-Up for September 23rd through 28th. If you're new here, I usually do my Geekly Wrap-Ups Monday through Sunday, but because of the way that the travel schedule for me works out this coming week, I am not going to be wrapping that up that way, so I'm going Monday through Sunday, and then I'm going to do the 29th through whenever it is that I finally get back from traveling, because I'm going to Canada for a board game convention this coming week, and it's going to be great. But anyway, let's go ahead and wrap up the books that I read. I read 4 books this week, and I played 1 new board game. The first book that I read is Queer as Camp, Essays on Summer Style and Sexuality, edited by Kenneth B. Kidd and Darrett Mason. This book was amazing. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It's a collection of essays that have to do with the summer camp as a site of queer identity forming and identity formation. It critically examines the location of the summer camp through the lens of race, gender identity, sexuality, and also does a really interesting job of unpacking the historical origins of scouting and summer camps and how they used to start out as these paramilitary organizations that really enforced some strict gender roles and gender segregation and things like that, and the ways in which they've kind of been co-opted by their queer campers as a place of forming identities against the sort of norm narrative that those organizations were designed to promote. I thought that this was excellent. 5 out of 5 stars. I'm going to be revisiting this in a couple future recommendation videos, specifically the essays about performing indigeneity in summer camp spaces and playing Indian. So I'm going to be revisiting that as we head into Indigenous Peoples Day and Heritage Month. Then another one that I finished on the plane, that was The Lost Coast by Amy Rose Capetta. This was a book that I had higher hopes of and then was ultimately kind of disappointed by. It is about this girl named, what is her name? Danny, who shows up in California's Lost Coast after some difficulties leaving her hometown in Michigan, and she meets the Greys, who are this found family of queer witches, and one of their members has gone missing, and they believe that Danny, because she has a witchy divining power, is going to be able to find Imogen, their missing member. I thought that this book was going to be better than it was, but ultimately I did find the story and the plotting to be pretty lackluster. However, this book does have great representation for people of color, queer people, people of non-binary identities, and so that's definitely a mark in its favor, but ultimately it just didn't really hold my interest that much. So I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Then I finished reading Dark Dawn by Jay Kristoff, which is the 3rd book in the Nevernight Chronicle, and now it's over. I have so many feelings about the end of this book. I ultimately gave this 4 out of 5, which is the same rating that I gave the first book, Nevernight. The second book, God's Grave, I gave 5 out of 5 because I think that book really pulled no punches. This was really difficult to follow up just how surprising and original God's Grave was. It had a lot of work to do to wrap up the narrative loose ends that Jay Kristoff had placed and make a lot of the foreshadowing come true, but ultimately I think this book did a really good job of that. It gave me a satisfying conclusion while also kind of tearing at my heartstrings a little bit. So yeah, I liked this a lot. I'm sad that this series is over, but I'm happy that now that means I can just return to it and reread any old time I want. It was great. And then the final book that I finished this week is Undead Girl Gang by Lily Anderson. This is another novel that I think did great in terms of representation and fell flatter in terms of story. It is about a young girl named, why can I never remember their names? Geez, I just finished this. Named Mila, who is a Latinx fat protagonist. Again, that's really good representation. And her best friend Riley has just died. Some people think by suicide, but really Mila suspects that her friend has been murdered, along with 2 other girls that also died under suspicious circumstances from her high school. So she decides that in order to get to the bottom of this, she's going to bring back Riley from the dead and figure out what really happened to her. Accidentally, she ends up bringing back the 2 sort of mean girls, I guess, of her school, June and Dayton, who are the other ones that died under mysterious circumstances, and together they are trying to form this sort of girl gang solves the mystery of who actually killed all of them. This book definitely contains trigger warnings for suicide and mentions of suicide throughout, because basically the entire town believes that the girls all committed suicide, which they didn't. But yeah, so I ultimately ended up liking the premise of this book a lot more than I liked the execution. It had a fair amount of like interesting murder mystery stuff, but it was overall too filled with like teen angst that I just wasn't really interested in reading about. I don't really have anything against angst, but this just wasn't like a good fit for me, I guess. Maybe I'm just getting too old for like YA contemporaries. That's probably it. I think I'm getting too old for certain aspects of YA in general. Even though I still enjoy reading them, I just find that they don't resonate as much as they did as I sort of age out of that target demographic. So there you go. Good representation, not so great in terms of the story. Okay, and then I did play one new board game this week that is called Tapestry, a civilization game, which is the new game by Jamie Stegmaier. He designed Scythe and Charterstone, and both of those are games that have kind of taken the board game world by storm. I'm going to put this box down because it's really heavy, and I don't feel like holding it up the entire time I talk about it. But what it is a game where you play as different civilizations that are investing in 4 different tracks: science, technology, exploration, and military. And as you advance in those tracks, it allows you to build buildings, and you're trying to make like the best capital city that you can. So you get points at the end of the game based off of how good your capital city looks and how much you've invested in the various tracks. I don't want to call them technology tracks because one of the tracks actually is called technology, but I guess it's like a research track, you know, like when you advance in the track, you're researching how to do things like pottery and space exploration and archery, cavalry, anything like that. So this game was good. It wasn't great though. There were a few things that actually held it back from being really, truly excellent. I think the main thing that held it back was the fact that this isn't really a civilization building game so much as it is a Euro game with a civilization theme slapped onto it. There's a lot of weird stuff that can happen out of order. For instance, where I was playing, I ended up spending almost no time investing in like mercantilism. Yet somehow I was able to do things like invent automobiles and also engage in stuff that like historically hasn't happened without industrialization in world cultures. So I thought that that was kind of weird that like I could be very low tech in some respects and then go off and do something like invent the space shuttle. So as far as like a civilization building game works, it kind of left me with a feeling of, well, there wasn't really much progression here. Usually in a civilization game, you're supposed to progress from like a lower tech civilization to a higher tech civilization. Here, because it was just done by like randomly drawing cards, it kind of happened all over the place. And I felt like that was maybe not to the game's benefit. The other thing that I disliked about this game was the fact that throughout the game, there's a lot of emphasis on getting these big buildings that are like painted miniatures and things like that to add to your capital city to make it look good. But the value of actually having one of those buildings in the capital city was so insignificant compared to other ways that you could get victory points that it really felt like a letdown where you really want to be invested in, you know, building a nice building for your city, but it actually isn't really worth it. And I thought that that was an instance where the board game design could have been done better, because when you design something, like I can understand, you know, cognitively that these buildings are not as important as maybe they appear. But when you design something that's made out of like heftier plastic materials than the rest of the board game, it's more colorful, it's larger. That design choice is saying you want the player to place a lot of value on that piece, acquiring that piece and putting it in their civilization. And the value that you got from putting one of those buildings in your capital city was not commensurate with what the design was telling you. So the design was telling you, look at this big, amazing, flashy thing like a space shuttle or a rubber factory or a giant farm or something. I think I had the giant farm, and I was like, oh, this is going to be so cool. I'll have the giant farm. The game design is telling me I want to have the giant farm because it's bigger and looks better than everything else in the game, when actually it ended up being one of the least valuable things I ended up with in my capital city, and things that were literally just moving a slider along on paper ended up being more valuable. So that is a quibble that I had with the way that this game is designed. But overall, it was good. I'm gonna play it again. I enjoyed it. I don't think that it is the best in terms of civilization building board games out there. I think you could do better with others. Maybe I'll make a video about civilization building board games. There actually is a civilization building board game based off of the Sid Meier's Civilization strategy game series of video games. At that point, I would just play the video game, just as soon play the video game. But yeah, I think that if you're interested in that sort of city building, unlocking new technologies, things like that, you might enjoy this game. But it is really expensive. I did not pay full price for this game, but I know that it retails for over $100, and I don't think it's worth it at that price point. Definitely don't pay full price for this. See if you can demo it at a board game shop. I got it, again, not for full price because it was part of the pre-order campaign. But I don't think that if I had been charged full price, I would have wanted to buy this game for what it actually is. So there's my 2 cents on that. I also forgot to mention another game that I played last week that was, again, surprisingly a little bit of a letdown, considering what a classic of board games it is, and that is the game Caverna. It's designed by Uwe Rosenberg, who is a legendary board game designer. He designed Agricola, basically just a bunch of other Euro worker placement type games. And Caverna, you are playing as these dwarves that live beneath the ground, and you are trying to gain points by building buildings above and below the ground. If you hang around board games for a long time, it's mostly gaining points by placing people and building buildings. You just gotta build the most things. And again, that was a game that I felt kind of suffered from some design issues. It just ended up being ultimately very clunky and fiddly because there are so many little things that you can do. There are so many individual little tiles in a 2-player game. I think that because we had such an overwhelming selection of buildings that we could build, yet no way for us to possibly build all of them or get the most use out of all of them, it just seemed like the game was bloated with a lot of extra decisions that might as well not have been there, since we wouldn't have been able to make them anyway, if that makes sense. It's really difficult to decide whether you're going to choose to build a place that's extra room for your sheep or an ore mine when there's just so many other things to choose from that you might as well just pick randomly at that point what you're going to build. It's difficult to get any sort of a strategy, at least in a 2-player game. It might be different at higher player counts, but again, I just played it at our board game cafe with my husband. So yeah, that game was kind of disappointing as well. Again, I'm glad I played it because it's kind of a classic, but I don't think that I'm gonna be raring to get back to it anytime soon. So I think that is gonna do it for this week's Geekly Wrap-Up. As I said before, I'm gonna be traveling next week. I'm going to a board game convention in Canada, so I'll probably be making some sort of travel vlog type thing of that, and I'm gonna have a lot of games to talk about when I come back next week and do this. So if you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. Please do subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, because I'm on my quest to get to 300 subscribers, and I'm getting closer every single time I log on to YouTube. So I'd really love to hit that milestone by the end of the year. So please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.